I was scrolling through Facebook Marketplace last Tuesday night, looking for a decent iPhone that wouldn't break my bank account. My old Android was literally falling apart. The screen had this massive crack running down the middle, and the battery died every few hours. I'd been putting off getting a new phone for months because, honestly, I'm pretty tight on cash right now. Anyway, I found this listing for an iPhone 12 Pro that seemed almost too good to be true. $300, which was way below market price. The seller's name was Melvin, and his profile looked normal enough. A few photos, seemed like a regular middle-aged guy, nothing that screamed scammer to me. I messaged him around 11 p.m. asking if it was still available. He responded within minutes, which should have been my first red flag looking back. Who's up at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night actively selling phones? But I was excited about potentially getting a good deal, so I ignored that little voice in my head. We went back and forth for about an hour discussing the phone's condition, and everything seemed legitimate. He said he was upgrading to the new iPhone and just wanted to get rid of his old one quickly. The photos he sent looked good, no visible damage, all the accessories included. We agreed to meet the next day at 3 p.m. at the police station parking lot on Main Street. I specifically suggested that location because I'd heard it was the safest place to meet strangers for these kinds of transactions. The next day, I got to the police station about 10 minutes early and parked near the front entrance where there were plenty of cameras and foot traffic. I sat in my car waiting, checking my phone every few minutes for any messages from Melvin. 3 o'clock came and went, then 3:15, then 3:30. I was starting to get annoyed because I'd taken time off work for this meeting. Finally, at 3:35, my phone buzzed with a text from him. "Sorry, man, had to step out for a quick errand. Can you meet me on Oakwood Road instead? It's just a few minutes from there." I looked up Oakwood Road on my GPS. It was about a mile away from the police station, heading toward the outskirts of town. Something about the sudden location change didn't sit right with me, but I figured maybe he had a legitimate reason. Maybe his car broke down or something. I texted back asking why the change, and he said his cousin lived nearby and he was dropping something off. It sounded reasonable enough, so I started driving toward Oakwood Road, but as I got closer to the area, I noticed the neighborhood was getting progressively more isolated. The streetlights were sparse, and there weren't many houses around. My gut started telling me something was off. I pulled over about halfway down Oakwood Road and just sat there for a minute, really thinking about the whole situation. The road was basically empty, just a few rundown houses scattered here and there, and most of them looked abandoned. There were no other cars around, no pedestrians, nothing. It was the kind of place where if something bad happened, nobody would hear you scream. I started getting this really uncomfortable feeling in my stomach, like when you know you're about to make a terrible mistake, but you're not sure why yet. I texted Melvin asking for the exact address, and he responded with, "Just drive down a bit more, you'll see my car." That was when every alarm bell in my head started going off. Why couldn't he just give me a house number? Why was he being so vague? I'd been watching too many true crime documentaries lately, and this whole scenario was starting to feel like the setup to one of those stories. You know, the ones where someone gets lured to a remote location under the pretense of buying something, only to get robbed or worse. I made the decision right then and there to turn around and get out of there. I texted him back saying I couldn't find the location and suggested we reschedule for another day at the original police station meeting spot. His response came back almost immediately, and it was aggressive. "Come on, man. I'm already here, waiting for you. Just drive down the road. It's not that hard to find." The tone was completely different from our previous messages, which had been friendly and casual. Now he sounded impatient and almost demanding. That sealed it for me. I put my car in reverse and started backing out of there as fast as I could safely manage. As I was turning around, I noticed a dark sedan parked about 200 yards down the road with its lights off. I couldn't see if anyone was inside because of the distance and the darkness, but the timing seemed too coincidental. My hands were actually shaking as I drove back toward the main road. I kept checking my rearview mirror to see if anyone was following me, paranoid that I might have just narrowly escaped something really bad. When I got back to the busier part of town, I felt like I could finally breathe again. I texted Melvin one more time, saying I wasn't comfortable with the location change, and asked if we could meet at the police station tomorrow instead. He never responded to that message, which pretty much confirmed my suspicions that something sketchy was going on. 3 days later, I was having lunch at this little diner called Murphy's on the other side of town with my co-worker Jake. We'd just finished up a job site inspection and decided to grab some food before heading back to the office. I was sitting in a booth facing the entrance, halfway through my burger, when this guy walked in who looked familiar. At first, I couldn't place where I'd seen him before, but something about his face was nagging at me. He was a middle-aged white guy, maybe, in his 40s, wearing a baseball cap and a worn-out jacket. He sat down at the counter and ordered coffee, but what caught my attention was how he kept looking around the restaurant, like he was scoping the place out. That's when it hit me. This was the same guy from the Facebook profile photos. This was Melvin. My stomach dropped, and I felt this wave of cold wash over me. What were the odds of randomly running into him at a restaurant across town? I tried to stay calm and not make it obvious that I recognized him, but my heart was racing. I pulled out my phone and discreetly opened Facebook to double-check his profile picture. Sure enough, it was definitely him. Same facial structure, same build. Everything matched up perfectly. I whispered to Jake that I needed to use the restroom, but instead of going to the bathroom, I positioned myself where I could get a better look at this guy without him noticing me. He was sitting alone, stirring his coffee, but his eyes were constantly moving around the room. He'd look at different customers, check out their phones, their wallets when they'd pull them out to pay. It was like he was cataloging everyone in the place, figuring out who might be worth targeting. The way he was studying people made my skin crawl. This wasn't normal behavior, this was predatory behavior. I watched him for about 10 minutes. And during that time, he never once looked at his own phone or seemed relaxed like a normal person would be. He was working, and his work was clearly figuring out who to scam or rob next. When an elderly woman at a nearby table pulled out what looked like an expensive smartphone to take a photo of her food, I saw him perk up and pay extra attention to her. That's when I knew for certain that my instincts about the whole phone sale situation had been spot on. This guy was definitely running some kind of scheme, and I had almost walked right into it. I went back to my table and told Jake we needed to leave right away. I couldn't explain everything without sounding paranoid, so I just said I wasn't feeling well and needed to get some air. Jake could tell something was seriously wrong because I'd gone pale and my hands were shaking again, just like they had been on Oakwood Road. We paid our bill quickly, and as we were walking out, I made sure to keep my head down and not look in Melvin's direction. But I could feel his eyes on me as we passed by the counter. There's this feeling you get when someone is staring at you, and it was so intense that the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Once we got outside, I finally felt like I could breathe normally again. Jake kept asking what was wrong, but I just told him I'd explain later. I didn't want to get into the whole story, right there in the parking lot, where Melvin might be able to see or hear us. We got in Jake's truck and drove back to work, but I couldn't concentrate on anything for the rest of the day. My mind kept racing, thinking about how close I'd come to walking into what was obviously some kind of trap. That evening, I decided to do some research on my own. I went back to Melvin's Facebook profile and started digging deeper into his information. What I found made me even more uncomfortable. His profile was actually pretty sparse, only about 30 friends, and most of the photos looked like they'd been posted recently, within the last few months. For someone who appeared to be in his 40s, that was suspicious. Most people our age have been on Facebook for years and have hundreds of friends and photos going back a decade. His employment section was vague, just listed as self-employed, and there was no education information. The more I looked at it, the more it seemed like a fake profile created specifically for running scams. I also noticed that he had several other items for sale. Not just phones, but laptops, gaming consoles, jewelry, all priced below market value. It was like he was running a whole operation, probably luring people to remote locations and robbing them. I started feeling sick thinking about how many people might have fallen for his trick, how many people had actually shown up on dark roads, like Oakwood, and didn't have the sense to turn around like I did. I couldn't sleep that night, tossing and turning, thinking about everything that had happened. Part of me felt like I should report this to the police, but what would I even tell them? That some guy tried to sell me a phone and wanted to meet in a weird location? That I saw him at a restaurant acting suspicious? It didn't feel like enough concrete evidence, and I was worried they'd think I was just being paranoid. But the more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that Melvin was running some kind of robbery scheme. The fake-looking Facebook profile, the last-minute location change to an isolated area, the way he was studying people at the restaurant, it all added up to something sinister. I kept imagining what would have happened if I'd actually driven all the way down Oakwood Road that day. Would there have been multiple guys waiting? Would they have had weapons? The thought made me feel nauseous. I'd always considered myself pretty street smart, but I realized how easily I could have walked into a dangerous situation just because I wanted to save some money on a phone. The next morning, I decided to check Melvin's Facebook page one more time, and that's when things got even weirder. His entire profile was gone, not deactivated, not restricted, completely deleted, like it had never existed in the first place. I tried searching for his name in different ways, checked my message, history, everything. It was like he'd vanished into thin air overnight. That's when I knew for sure that my suspicions were correct. Legitimate sellers don't delete their entire online presence right after a failed transaction. This confirmed that he was definitely running some kind of scam operation, and probably realized that I'd figured him out somehow. Maybe he'd recognized me at the restaurant too, or maybe he just routinely deleted and recreated profiles to avoid getting caught. Either way, the fact that he disappeared so completely made me realize how close I'd come to becoming a victim. I felt this weird combination of relief and terror. Relief that I'd trusted my instincts and avoided whatever trap he'd set, but terror thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't been so cautious. Over the next few weeks, I became obsessed with checking local news and police reports, looking for any stories about robberies or attacks involving fake online sales. I found a few incidents that sounded similar. People getting lured to remote locations under the pretense of buying electronics, only to get robbed at gunpoint. One case happened just 2 towns over, about a month before my encounter with Melvin. A college student had arranged to buy a laptop through Facebook Marketplace, met the seller in an empty parking lot, and ended up getting robbed of his cash and his own phone. The description of the seller was vague, but it mentioned a middle-aged white male who'd used the name Mike on Facebook. Reading that article gave me chills because I realized it could have easily been me. The student was lucky. He only lost his money and phone. But what if the next victim fought back? What if someone got seriously hurt or worse? I started wondering how many other Melvins and Mikes were out there, creating fake profiles and targeting people who were just trying to find good deals online. I also started paying more attention to the online marketplace groups I was part of. Once you know what to look for, the red flags become obvious. Profiles with very few friends, prices that seem too good to be true, sellers who insist on meeting in remote locations instead of public places. I saw the same patterns over and over again. I even started commenting on some of the more suspicious listings, warning other potential buyers to be careful and always meet at police stations. Some people thanked me, but others thought I was being paranoid. I guess you have to experience something like this yourself to really understand how real the danger is. Most people think it'll never happen to me, which is exactly what these scammers are counting on. They prey on people who are trusting, people who are looking for good deals, people who don't expect to encounter predators in everyday situations like buying a used phone. The scariest part is how normal and legitimate everything seems at first, until that moment when your gut tells you something is wrong. A couple of months passed, and I'd pretty much put the whole Melvin situation behind me. I'd gotten a new phone through a legitimate retailer, even though it cost me more than I wanted to spend. Life went back to normal, and I stopped obsessively, checking crime reports every day. But then something happened that brought it all flooding back. I was at the grocery store on a Saturday afternoon, doing my weekly shopping, when I saw him again. Melvin was in the produce section, picking out apples like any other normal customer. At first I thought maybe I was mistaken. It had been a couple of months, and I'd only seen him that one time at the restaurant. But as I got closer, pretending to look at bananas, I was certain it was him. Same face, same build, even wearing a similar baseball cap. My heart started pounding, and I felt that familiar cold wave wash over me. What were the chances of running into this guy twice in random locations? It felt like more than just coincidence. I tried to act casual, but I kept an eye on him while I continued shopping. He seemed relaxed, not looking around suspiciously like he had at the restaurant. He was just shopping for groceries like anyone else would on a weekend. But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. He had a cart full of stuff, but he also had multiple cell phones. I could see at least 3 different phones sticking out of his jacket pockets, and there might have been more. Who carries around that many phones unless they're up to something shady? I watched him check all of them periodically, like he was monitoring multiple conversations or deals at once. That's when it hit me. He was probably still running his scam operation, maybe even more actively than before. Those phones were probably burner devices he used to create different fake profiles and contact potential victims. The grocery store was just another hunting ground for him, a place to spot targets and figure out who might have money to steal. I realized he might have been studying me the same way he'd been studying that elderly woman at the restaurant. Finished my shopping as quickly as possible and got out of there, but the encounter left me deeply unsettled. For weeks afterward, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if I'd run into Melvin again. It was like he'd become this shadow that kept appearing in my life at random moments. I started avoiding that grocery store altogether, even though it was the most convenient one near my house. I also became way more paranoid about online transactions. I'd practically interrogate sellers before agreeing to meet them, and I insisted on meeting only at busy police stations during daylight hours. My friends started joking that I'd become too cautious, but they didn't understand what it felt like to know you'd been targeted by someone who was clearly dangerous. The worst part was the randomness of it all. How do you protect yourself from someone who just appears in normal places, living what looks like a regular life while running criminal operations on the side? That was about 6 months ago, and I haven't seen Melvin since. Sometimes I wonder if he moved to a different area, or if he just got better at avoiding detection. Maybe he recognized me at the grocery store too, and decided I was too much of a risk. Or maybe our paths just haven't crossed again by pure luck. I still check his name on Facebook sometimes, though I never find anything. He's probably cycling through different fake identities by now. The whole experience taught me that predators don't always look like what you'd expect. They blend in. They seem normal. They shop for groceries and drink coffee at diners just like everyone else. But they're always working, always looking for their next opportunity. I'll probably never know how many people Melvin successfully scammed, or if he ever escalated to more serious crimes. All I know is that I trusted my instincts when something felt wrong, and that probably saved me from becoming another victim. To this day, I can't explain the strange series of coincidences that led to me encountering him multiple times, but I'm grateful that each time I had the sense to get away safely. Some mysteries are better left unsolved.